There's nothing new under the pun. Hi everyone, I'm Jacob, I'm the Cowhat Librarian, and I'm here today to talk to you about Don't Check Out This Book by Kate Klise. This is yet another entry in the selection of books that I believe were written with a librarian audience in mind. It seems very, very tailored to appeal to librarians who believe in intellectual freedom and that every book has its reader and vice versa. So Appleton School is in a bit of a pickle. Its enrollment has dropped severely. They're one student shy of the minimum necessary to keep the school running, and they haven't had a school library in 14 years. Well, luckily, just before the summer break, the school principal and the secretary hired a brand new librarian, and she sweeps into town. She's ready to start the library from scratch, and she even has a daughter, which will bring the enrollment up to snuff. But there's a few problems. The new school board president has her own idea about the way things should be run. She believes that everyone should be much more proper and elegant and respectful, and so she's instituted a dress code that has some fairly exacting requirements that all coincidentally are available at her clothing store in town. And she's in debt to a local bank and has to find ways to encourage people to buy more of her clothing to keep her from going bankrupt. Well, the librarian settles in and she starts up the new library, including what she calls the Green Dot Collection. And it's a series of books on sensitive subjects that her school children don't need to use a card to borrow. They can quietly, discreetly borrow a book on a topic they need to learn about, read the book, and return it. No questions asked, no information needed. And the Green Dot book collection becomes very popular and sort of infamous in the town, and becomes something that the school board president doesn't think should exist. That there shouldn't be this secret collection. You can't have kids borrowing books without using their cards and having a record of it. And she starts her efforts to have the school principal get rid of the librarian and tries to give demerits for the librarian's daughter not conforming to the dress code. And by that she means didn't buy her exact clothing from her store to her specific requirements. And over the course of things escalate and escalate and escalate as the school year goes on. And it was fun. It was like the author took the books Ban This Book by Alan Gratz, The Legend of Spud Murphy by Eoin Colfer, and Mrs. B's Magical Bookcase by Marguerite Rurs, who, as an aside, is a very lovely person. I met her during an author tour a few years back, and she was wonderful to work with. But it feels like this author threw those books in a blender and wrote it in an interesting style as a collection of emails and memos and newspaper stories rather than a conventional narrative. And this book was the result. The characters were fairly one-dimensional, which is fine. It's a very clear-cut story of a heroic librarian who puts on her cape and fights for the right of kids to read whatever they please, versus the evil school board president who doesn't want these kids reading things. So it's very easy to see who the hero and who the villain are. And they're not played with any degree of subtlety. There's not a single person in this book that's written in any sort of subtle way. And it's fine, it's good, I enjoyed it. And if you liked any of those books I previously mentioned, I might suggest that you try this. Try borrowing it from your local library. With that said, there are spoilers ahead because I have to talk about the deal breakers. Now, as I said, there wasn't a lot of subtlety in this book, and that's fine for the most part, but the school board president's evilness or villainy was just kind of ridiculous. She's in debt, so she tries to make more money selling school uniforms, which, fine, that made sense to me. But then she got into her head that because the school librarian was able to run a fundraiser with the local farm, she should too, by buying pickles and trying to force them onto the school lunch menu and selling them to the school at a profit. It just became cartoonish. And that brings me to the absolute worst deal breaker. Every person in this book has a horrible pun name, and they were insufferable. The evil school board president's name is Ivana Biprapa. The librarian's daughter's name is May Be Dangerous. The principal, who's extremely forgetful, his name is Noah Memory. Then there's Cy Durr and Reed Durr, the family who owns the apple orchard and farm. And it was just a little ridiculous to plow through all the names. If the author had ditched the pun names that feel like they were pulled from the 1980s Carmen Sandiego games, it would have been a lot more fun to read, in my opinion. I got sick of the pun names. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe a reluctant reader in, grades 3, 4, 5 who likes libraries well enough might get a laugh out of the pun names once or twice. I'm not convinced it would be enough to make them stick with it, though. At any rate, I still liked it. It was still fun. Just don't expect a lot and try not to groan when you read the pun names. With that, thanks for listening to me talk about this book. If you enjoyed this video, please like, please subscribe, and please check back to see what else I have to talk about from the Cowhat Library. Thank you. Bye now.